They tell you that people are basically good, that most interactions are honest, that you can trust people's intentions at face value. But Machiavelli knew something most people refuse to accept. Everyone around you is using psychological tactics to influence your behavior, your decisions, your emotions, your actions. And they're doing it so subtly, so naturally, that you don't even realize it's happening. Because dark psychology isn't just used by criminals and sociopaths, it's used by your friends, your family, your co-workers, your romantic partners. Everyone who wants something from you is using these techniques, whether they realize it or not. And the reason you don't recognize them is because you've been conditioned to believe that psychological manipulation is obvious, dramatic, theatrical. But the truth is, the most effective psychological tactics are the ones that feel natural, normal, even helpful. And if you don't understand how these secrets work, you'll spend your entire life being influenced, controlled and manipulated by people who understand human psychology better than you do. And Machiavelli would tell you that ignorance of these tactics doesn't protect you from them, it just makes you a more effective target for those who know how to use them. Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and leave a like if this resonates with you. Comment below if you've experienced this or know someone who has. Now let's continue. Secret number 1, the reciprocity trap. This is probably the most used psychological manipulation tactic in existence. And it works because it exploits your natural desire to return favors, to balance social exchanges, to not feel indebted to others. Here's how it works. Someone does something nice for you, something small, something that doesn't cost them much but creates a psychological debt in your mind. They buy you coffee, they help you with a task, they give you a compliment, they offer you assistance. And now you feel obligated to return the favor. And that's exactly what they want. Because now when they ask you for something bigger, something more significant, something that benefits them more than it benefits you, you feel like you owe them. And you're more likely to say yes, even if you don't really want to do it. This tactic works because reciprocity is hardwired into human psychology. We're social creatures, and we survive through mutual cooperation. But manipulators exploit this by creating artificial debts. They do small favors not out of kindness, but as investments in future compliance. They're essentially buying your yes with strategic kindness, and most people fall for it because they think the person is just being nice. But Machiavelli would tell you that strategic niceness is still strategy, and you should always ask yourself, why is this person being so helpful? What do they want from me? What are they setting up? Because genuine kindness doesn't create psychological debt. It doesn't come with expectations. It doesn't make you feel obligated to return specific favors. Secret number 2, the social proof manipulation. This exploits your natural tendency to look to others for guidance on how to behave, how to think, how to feel about situations you're not sure about. Someone will tell you that everyone is doing something, that most people think a certain way, that it's normal to behave in a particular manner. And they're using the power of social proof to make you conform to their desired outcome. They'll say things like, everyone at work thinks you should do this, or most people in your situation would handle it this way, or it's normal for people to feel this way about this situation. But here's what they're really doing. They're manufacturing consensus. They're creating the illusion that there's a social standard that you should follow, and that following it is normal, expected, appropriate. But Machiavelli knew that manufactured consensus is not real consensus. It's manipulation disguised as social guidance. And the person who uses social proof to influence your behavior is essentially peer pressuring you using imaginary peers. People use this tactic because humans are herd animals. We look to the group for safety, for validation, for guidance on appropriate behavior. But manipulators exploit this by creating fake social pressure. They tell you what everyone else is doing. Not because it's true, but because they want you to do it too. And most people comply because they don't want to be the odd one out. They don't want to be seen as difficult or different or resistant to social norms. But the truth is, the person using social proof manipulation often can't provide specific examples of who exactly is doing what they're claiming everyone is doing, because it's not based on reality. It's based on their desire to influence your behavior. Secret number 3, the commitment and consistency trap. This exploits your psychological need to be consistent with your previous statements, decisions, and actions. Someone will get you to agree to something small, something that seems reasonable, something that aligns with your values or your self-image, and then they'll use that small commitment to pressure you into larger commitments that you might not actually want to make. They'll say things like, "You said you cared about this issue, so you should do this," or "You mentioned that you value fairness, so you should support this," or "You told me you were a loyal friend, so you should help me with this." They're essentially trapping you with your own words, your own values, your own previous commitments, and using them to manipulate your future behavior. This works because humans have a deep psychological need to be consistent to avoid cognitive dissonance to maintain a coherent self-image. And when someone points out that your current behavior doesn't match your previous statements or your stated values, you feel psychological pressure to conform to maintain consistency. But Machiavelli would warn you that this consistency trap is manipulation, because it takes your words out of context. It applies them to situations you never intended. It ignores the fact that circumstances change, that new information can change your position, that you have the right to reconsider your commitments without being labeled as inconsistent or hypocritical. The person using this tactic is essentially holding you hostage to your past self and preventing you from making decisions based on your current understanding, your current needs, your current circumstances. Secret number 4, the scarcity and urgency manipulation. This exploits your fear of missing out, your fear of loss, your fear of regret. Someone will tell you that an opportunity is limited, that time is running out, that you need to decide now or you'll lose your chance forever. They create artificial deadlines, artificial limitations, artificial pressure to make you act quickly without thinking carefully. They'll say things like, "This offer expires today," or "There are only a few spots left," or "If you don't decide now, someone else will get it and you'll regret it forever." But here's what they're really doing. They're preventing you from making rational decisions. They're bypassing your logical thinking process. They're making you act on emotion, on fear, on impulse, rather than on careful consideration. Because when you're under time pressure, when you feel like you might lose something, you're more likely to make decisions that benefit them rather than decisions that benefit you. Machiavelli understood that rushed decisions are rarely good decisions, and the person who rushes you into a decision is usually doing so because they know that if you had time to think about it, you would probably say, "No, real opportunities don't disappear overnight. Legitimate offers don't require immediate decisions without consideration. Time, authentic scarcity, doesn't need to be manufactured or emphasized constantly. If someone is pressuring you to decide quickly, it's usually because they know their offer doesn't stand up to scrutiny, and they want your commitment before you realize that." Secret number 5, the emotional manipulation through false empathy. This is one of the most insidious forms of psychological manipulation because it disguises itself as care, as understanding, as emotional support. Someone will mirror your emotions, they'll validate your feelings, they'll make you feel understood and heard and seen, and then they'll use that emotional connection to influence your behavior, to get you to do things you might not otherwise do. They'll say things like, "I understand how you feel. I've been through the same thing. I know exactly what you're going through, and I think you should do this." They're essentially using your emotional vulnerability against you. They're exploiting your need for understanding, your need for connection, your need for validation to get you to comply with their agenda. But Machiavelli would tell you that genuine empathy doesn't come with strings attached. Real understanding doesn't lead to specific behavioral recommendations. Authentic emotional support doesn't have a hidden agenda. The person who uses false empathy is essentially an emotional predator. They're hunting for your vulnerabilities, your insecurities, your emotional needs, and then they're feeding those needs just enough to gain your trust. And then they're using that trust to manipulate your behavior. This tactic is particularly effective because it feels so good to be understood, to be validated, to feel like someone really gets you. But the person using false empathy doesn't really understand you. They're just good at reading emotional cues and mirroring them back to you to create the illusion of understanding while pursuing their own agenda. Secret number 6, The authority and expertise manipulation. This exploits your natural tendency to defer to people who seem to know more than you do, who have more experience, who have more credentials, who have more authority. Someone will position themselves as an expert, as an authority, as someone who knows better than you do, and then they'll use that perceived expertise to influence your decisions. They'll say things like, "Trust me, I know what I'm talking about," or "I've been doing this for years," or "I have experience in this area, and I'm telling you this is the right way to do it." But here's what they're really doing. They're using the appearance of authority to bypass your critical thinking. They're making you feel like you're not qualified to make your own decisions, like you need their guidance, like you should follow their recommendations without question. But Machiavelli knew that real expertise doesn't need to be constantly asserted. Real authority doesn't need to be defended. Real knowledge doesn't need to shut down questions or alternative perspectives. The person who uses authority manipulation is often insecure about their actual level of expertise, and they're trying to compensate by claiming more authority than they actually have. They're hoping that you'll be intimidated by their claimed expertise and that you'll follow their advice without questioning it. But true experts welcome questions. They encourage critical thinking. They want you to understand their reasoning, not just follow their conclusions blindly. Secret number 7, the isolation and dependency creation. This is perhaps the most dangerous of all dark psychology tactics because it's designed to make you dependent on the manipulator for your emotional well-being, your social connections, your sense of reality, your decision-making ability. Someone will gradually isolate you from other people, other perspectives, other sources of information and support. They'll create situations where you increasingly depend on them for validation, for guidance, for social interaction, for emotional support. They'll subtly criticize your other relationships. They'll question your other sources of information. They'll make you feel like they're the only ones who truly understand you, who truly care about you, who truly have your best interests at heart. But what they're really doing is creating dependency. They're making you emotionally, psychologically, socially dependent on them, so that you'll be less likely to question them, less likely to leave them, less likely to seek other perspectives or other sources of support. This tactic works because humans are social creatures. We need connection, we need support, we need validation. And when someone becomes our primary or only source of these things, we become vulnerable to their influence. We become afraid to displease them, afraid to question them, afraid to lose them, because we feel like we have nowhere else to go. But Machiavelli would warn you that healthy relationships don't require isolation. They don't require you to cut off other people, other perspectives, other sources of support. They encourage you to maintain diverse relationships, to seek multiple perspectives, to think independently, to make your own decisions. The reason these tactics work so well is that they exploit normal human psychological needs and tendencies. The need for reciprocity, the need for social acceptance, the need for consistency, the need to avoid loss, the need for emotional connection, the need to defer to expertise, the need for social support. These are all normal, healthy human needs. But manipulators exploit these needs. They weaponize them. They turn them against you to serve their own agenda. And the most dangerous part is that these tactics often feel good in the moment. They make you feel cared for, understood, supported, guided. But the long-term result is that you lose your independence, your critical thinking ability, your emotional autonomy, your freedom to make your own decisions based on your own values and your own assessment of what's best for you. So how do you protect yourself from these tactics? First, you recognize them, you understand how they work. You become aware of when they're being used on you. Second, you slow down. You don't make decisions under pressure. You don't respond immediately to emotional manipulation. You give yourself time to think, to consider alternatives, to seek other perspectives. Third, you maintain your independence. You keep diverse relationships. You seek multiple sources of information. You don't become emotionally dependent on any one person. Fourth, you trust your instincts. If something feels manipulative, it probably is. If someone is pressuring you to do something you don't want to do, they're probably manipulating you. If someone is isolating you from other people, they're probably trying to control you. And fifth, you remember that you have the right to change your mind, to say no, to protect yourself, to make decisions based on your own judgment, not someone else's agenda. Because the person who understands these dark psychology secrets is the person who can't be easily manipulated, and that's the kind of person Machiavelli would respect.